Yo, what's going on everybody? It's FreakyDude99 and welcome back to another Destiny 2 TheFinalShape build video. Now this time I have a wonderful Prismatic Warlock to present to you today. This is a build you can get cooking with as soon as you get in with the campaign, and then of course once you finish it you get all your fragments. You can put this build together and my golly, it absolutely smokes down everything. You're getting tons of Transcendence energy, so you're always being able to pop that and use your overpowered grenade, and then plus you just lock down the entire battlefield with slowing and freezing. It truly is such a wonderful build to not only help out your teammates and provide a ton of crowd control, but also just provide yourself a ton of damage with Song of Flame, and of course double grenades with our exotic gauntlets. Now this build is just absolutely amazing, and of course if you want a picture of it, there's going to be one at the end of the video along with a dim link in the description for easy copying. Without further ado, let's just jump into the build. Now, starting off with the subclass, of course, we have Prismatic, and for our super, we are taking Song of Flame. Song of Flame is the new solar super for Warlocks, and it's absolutely amazing. It grants us Radiant instantly, so we can pop anti-barrier shields quickly while it's active. We also get an absolutely overpowered homing grenade, and just a deadly amount of damage on our melee as well. This thing lasts for quite a bit of time, and it allows you to just clear through adds with no issue. Another reason we're also taking Song of Flame is because of one of our fragments, Facet of Purpose. Facet of Purpose makes it so when we pick up an Orb of Power, we get a buff that associates with our equipped super. Because we have Solar on, we're getting Restoration, and Restoration feeds into this build beautifully because it allows us just to have that constant healing while we're in the thick of battle. Moving forward, we're grabbing Healing Rift, but actually I like to play around with both Healing Rift and Phoenix Dive with this build. In a lot of content, especially this episode and this season, Phoenix Dive is useful because you're moving around a lot and having that instant heal is really nice. But in other cases, as you start to go up into higher content like Master Level Nightfalls or the Expert Level Arena Breach executable, you want to bring in something like Healing Rift so you can pop it down, get healing, and just focus on taking out enemies from a little bit of ways away. Now, moving forward, we're grabbing the Melee Pocket Singularity. This is a melee that I personally like just because it has some decent range and it allows you to push back enemies that get a little too close to you, because Warlocks don't do well in close range. Now, what I will say is, as much as Pocket Singularity is good, there's also a lot of cases that Penumbral Blast is really useful. The fact that it's an instant freeze allows you to quickly freeze off an unstoppable champion or even an overload just to lock them down, and that can be really nice depending on the content you're in. As well as if you're really looking for a strong melee, I would recommend using Arcane Needle just because of its range. A lot of times with a Warlock, your melee range is really short, and that means when you're in harder level content, it means it's harder to actually get those melee procs off to feed into the rest of your builds. So by using Arcane Needle, you can just pop your melee and it'll just send off infinitely and strike the enemy that you want to. Instead of with Penumbral Blast or Pocket Singularity, there's many cases where you send it out and then it explodes right before actually reaching the enemy and doesn't deal any damage at all. So it's personal opinion, but again, try out Arcane Needle and also try out Penumbral Blast, and if you're looking just to have some fun, Pocket Singularity. Now moving forward as well, our grenade, we are taking Cold Snap Grenade. Not only is it a fantastic grenade that creates a little secret projectile, but we're also using the Osmiomancy Gauntlets, which gives us 2 charges of our Cold Snap. This is fantastic because of course if we already have 1 charge, we have increased grenade regen, and being able to throw out 2 grenades and just freeze the entire battlefield is so nice, especially on Prismatic. As well as with this, moving forward, we're also taking Bleak Watcher as one of our aspects. Bleak Watcher allows us to hold and consume our grenade and throw it out to make a stasis turret, and this stasis turret lasts for quite a while, fires slowing projectiles that can stun overloads as well as freeze unstoppables to shatter them, and it's just a huge crowd control ability that just allows you to lock down any battlefield that you come upon. Bleak Watcher just does a wonderful job, and even when you throw out just a single turret and then throw your other grenade just as a regular cold snap, it can be really helpful because again, we're getting so much grenade regen because of our second aspect, Feed the Void. Feed the Void makes it so when we defeat a target with any ability, we activate Devour, which Devour restores additional health every time we get a takedown, and we get bonus grenade energy. So not only are we just getting a bunch of health and survivability just from taking down enemies, but we're also getting Devour procced super easily from our Bleak Watcher. We're freezing enemies, so we're also proccing a bunch of Devour, so we're getting our grenade back, allowing us to throw out even more Bleak Watchers. Feed the Void and Bleak Watchers are the first aspects you get as well with this Prismatic Warlock, so this is a wonderful build that you can take down Legendary Campaign with, and then take it into Master level Nightfalls from there. Now, moving forward, we are going to cover our fragments. Starting off, we have Facet of Balance. Rapidly defeating targets with light damage grants melee energy, but the important thing is rapidly defeating targets with darkness damage grants grenade energy. Since we're applying so much darkness damage from our Bleak Watchers and our Cold Snap grenades, this means that we're getting our grenade energy back super quickly, allowing us to throw out even more Bleak Watcher turrets. Again, we're also using Facet of Purpose, which we already covered, and we're using Facet of Command. Now, Facet of Command was the subject of a recent nerf, and while that nerf is pretty substantial, I still think it is worth taking it with this build. Facet of Command makes it so when you freeze or suppress an enemy, it reloads your equipped weapons and increases weapon stability, aim assist, and airborne effectiveness, as well as defeating frozen or suppressed targets, create a stasis shard, or avoid breach. We're constantly defeating frozen enemies, so we're constantly getting stasis shards, but the key thing is that reload from freezing enemies is now on a much longer delay with this recent nerf. The thing about it is we're constantly freezing enemies all around, so we don't really worry about that nerf because the weapons we're using have such a high ammo capacity, but that by the time that cooldown goes down, we're getting the reload anyway. So I would actually still highly recommend using Facet of Command even post nerf. Now moving forward, we're also taking Facet of Devotion. Defeating targets afflicted by stasis or strand debuffs grant bonus light transcendence energy. We are dealing a lot of dark damage with this build, so having this to get that extra light damage in so we can actually get our transcendence is really nice to have. And then finally, we have Facet of Ruin, which increases the size and damage of the burst when you shatter a stasis crystal or frozen target. We're constantly freezing, so we want that increased damage from this, as well as we have increased area of effect from our solar ignitions, which we do apply quite a bit of solar ignitions when we use our Song of Flame super. And that is going to do it for the subclass. Moving on to the weapons. Starting off with the weapons, our main exotic weapon of choice is going to be the Trace Rifle Aegir's Scepter. This stasis weapon is absolutely fantastic with any stasis build, and of course with a warlock that's dealing with stasis damage, it's beautiful. This allows you to take down enemies, apply slowing all around, cause more freezing, create more stasis shards, and just feed into that whole Bleak Watcher kind of stasis warlock while taking advantage of everything that Prismatic offers. Aegir's Scepter, of course, just does an absolute amazing amount of damage, especially when you have your stasis weapon surges stacked up and you're having a stasis surge on whatever activity you're playing. As well as if you have the Catalyst and you can overcharge it with your super, it's amazing for taking down Subjugators, Omens, and even Tormentors, popping their shield and then taking out their chest spot. It's really a fantastic weapon all around, but if you don't want to use Aegir's Scepter, there's also a lot of really cool stasis weapons that came out this season. We of course have the Stasis Special Launcher Lost Signal that came from Episode Echoes, and it's really just a weapon that you have to fire to really see what it does. But again, that is an absolutely fun weapon that you can use and take into any piece of content. Aegir's Scepter does a fantastic job at providing a lot of damage, but it's not absolutely required. This build does have a little bit of fluidity with the weapons you choose. You also have the brand new Stasis hand cannon bold endings that comes from the TheFinalShape and the Pale Heart Destination, and that thing can roll with Headstone Dragonfly, which allows you to deal some massive stasis damage out in the wild. Moving forward, for your energy weapons, I would recommend something to deal with champions, specifically anti-barriers or whatever you're dealing with in your current content. For anti-barriers, I've been using a pulse rifle adhorative, which I found to be very useful. You can craft it with heal clip and incandescent, and nano munitions provide that extra bit of damage that you might be looking for. You of course have other pulse rifles like the Battler, or even submachine guns like Subjunctive or Callus Mini Tool. There's a lot of really great special weapons out there to use, and again, you have a lot of fluidity with what you're using because you're not permanently locked into the exotic you're using. Finally, for our heavy weapon, there is a number of stasis weapons out there like Cold Comfort, which is a fantastic rocket launcher. You also have the brand new Stasis Sword Ill Omen, which again, it's a caster frame which allows you to send out ranged projectiles, deal some extra damage, and stay safe from a distance. Now, one weapon I'd recommend you actually try out in your heavy slot is the Stasis Machine Gun Chain of Command. It's a ritual weapon from Season of the Haunted, which means you can go and grab it for just some glimmer and potentially an Ascendant Cipher from the Memory to Lost Lights or that exotic vault next to your vaults in the tower. Chain of Command is wonderful because not only does it roll with Adrenaline Junkie, but it also rolls with Demolitionist, allowing you to rack up a ton of grenade energy, throw out Bleak Watchers, reload Chain of Command with every throw out, and then keep firing this thing for more grenade ammo. Not only that, but Adrenaline Junkie provides a high amount of damage increase, allowing you to take out yellow bars even in expert or master level content. Chain of Command really slots in beautifully with this build, and then add to that with Facet of Command. You have Chain of Command and you have Aegir's Scepter. You can just swap between the two and never reload because you're constantly freezing, you're getting those reloads off, you're getting Demolitionist procs, so you have Bleak Watchers just all over the field laying waste to everything. Again, check out Chain of Command. It's a fantastic stasis machine gun to take into any piece of content. Starting off with the artifact perks here, in the first column, pick 3 anti-champion perks. Whatever you're dealing with, whatever weapons you're using, make sure to line them up with the artifact, because not only do they provide the anti-barrier champion or the anti-champion rounds, but they also overcharge the weapon, which when you're going into higher difficulty content, this is a 25% damage increase to that weapon, which you don't want to miss out on. In second column, we are taking Overcharged Armory, so a bunch of weapons from this season, from the Pale Heart, from Episode Echoes, and the returning weapons Season of Dawn. They're all overcharged as well, and they have their origin traits enhanced. So again, if we're using any of those weapons, they're buffed up. We're also using Winning Hands, so whenever we're using Dealer's Choice weapons, we're getting just some extra bonuses on top of that. It's really nice to have again, but you're not always using these weapons, so don't worry about it too much. In third column, we're taking Elemental Siphon, so rapid final blows with a kinetic weapon or a weapon matching your equipped super. Create an elemental pickup that matches your equipped super. This is why it's a little bit better to run solar energy weapons, like I've been using a solar pulse rifle and a solar submachine gun. That's because it allows us to actually spawn fire sprites because our super is solar. Moving down, we also take Overload Swords. We are able to stun overloads very easily, but there's many times that we're in higher level content that we can't throw a Bleak Watcher out, and being able to reliably stun an overload champion is really important, especially when you're in something like a Master Nightfall. And then we have Creeping Chill, which is the real bread and butter. It makes it so Stasis weapon final blows against slowed or frozen targets release a burst that slows. So when you have Aegir's Scepter on, this just doubles. And then of course, when you are taking out your Bleak Watchers, when you're slowing everything, you pull out Chain of Command. Now Chain of Command is slowing everything around enemies. You're freezing enemies, you're spawning more Stasis shards. It's really beautiful what this build pulls off. Now moving forward to 4th column, we're taking counter energy, so whenever we stun a champion, we gain energy to our least charged ability. Just nice to have in the ability rotation, because we're also using radiant orbs. So while we have our prismatic equipped, whenever we pick up an orb of power, we're getting radiant, which allows us to have anti-barrier rounds, but again, we're not relying on those anti-barrier rounds for whatever content we're in. We're usually relying on the anti-barrier weapon or the actual radiant that comes from popping our super. And then finally for 5th column, we're taking Shield Crush. So of course, while we have Woven Mail, Frost Armor, or Void Overshield, our melee recharges faster. We don't have any of those really, so we're not worrying about that because again, this isn't a melee build. What we're really interested in is while we are Amplified or Radiant, our grenade recharges faster and deals increased damage. We are pretty much always Radiant with this build, so we're getting that increased grenade regen and we're getting that increased damage off. Add to that, we also have Transference, so we gain increased grenade and melee damage while we're Transcendent, as well as Weapon Final Blows while Transcendent refund light and dark energy after Transcendence ends. While we have Transcendence, Aegir's Scepter gets a massive amounts of damage increase just because of that bonus prismatic energy going into it, which allows you to just shred through enemies. It gets a bunch of Transcendence energy back, and then we also get light Transcendence energy from slowing enemies, so we just permanently are in this loop of popping it, going out, and then popping it again. The artifact this season is absolutely bonkers, and there it is. Moving on to the armor mods now. Now starting off with the armor, we're taking Stasis Siphon here, so when we're getting all our Stasis takedowns with our Aegir's Scepter or Chain of Command, we're actually spawning Orbs of Power. We're also taking Special Ammo Finder, which applies to our primary weapon takedowns. The more primary weapon takedowns, the higher chance we have to actually spawn a special ammo brick. This is really important to allow us to actually use Aegir's Scepter consistently. Instead of treating it like a special weapon, we can actually treat it like a primary weapon. And then finally, we're taking Ashes to Assets, which we gain bonus super energy on grenade kills. There's many times when Bleak Watcher actually takes down enemies and the little bolts actually shatter enemies, and this grants us a lot of super energy, allowing us to use Song of Flame really quickly. Now quickly touching on the stat focusing, of course first we want to focus Resilience to 100 for that 30% damage reduction. Having this in endgame content is absolutely vital to actually having an enjoyable time, because any lower means you have a chance of just being flat out one shot. Next up, we want to have Discipline as high as possible, ideally to 100 as well, so we can use our grenade as much as possible, because again, throwing out Bleak Watchers and covering the battlefield with all our grenades is what we want to do, and having our Discipline higher means we can actually achieve that. Now thirdly, we want to make sure our recovery stat is at least to tier 50. Any higher and we're going to be wasting stats, so make sure your recovery stat is up to 50 and that any extra stats can go into strength. Having your strength higher means you can actually fuel your grenade a loop, so again, it's not like we need strength to be high, but the higher it is means that we can actually use our grenade more. Down to the gauntlets, we have our exotic, the Osmiomancy gloves, which come with the exotic intrinsic Fervid Cold Snap. This makes it so our Cold Snap grenades have an additional charge and recharge quicker on direct impact, as well as the Seeker spawned from Cold Snap grenades travels further. This allows us to not only throw out one Bleak Watcher, but also throw out an additional Cold Snap grenade, and then that feeds into the recharging, so you can actually get into this loop of throwing out a Bleak Watcher, throwing out a Cold Snap, and throwing out a Bleak Watcher. These Cold Snap grenades having this increased recharge time also makes it very nice, because whenever we're in a difficult situation where enemies are coming up at us, we can just throw a Cold Snap at the ground, freeze those enemies, deal with them, and then get our increased grenade regen to actually throw out a Bleak Watcher. Osmiomancy fits in beautifully with Prismatic, and seeing as we get Cold Snap with Prismatic Warlock, it means they just go even harder than before. Now to touch on the mods, we're grabbing Impact Induction, so causing damage with a powered melee attack reduces our grenade cooldown. This is why we want that increased ranged melee, or just to actually land our melee, because again, it gives us that 10% grenade energy. While it isn't a lot, it's still quite a bit, especially when you're in those tight spots. We're also taking momentum transfer because all of our Bleak Watcher damage hits are going to be proccing melee cooldown for us. Now this is on a 7-second cooldown, but since Bleak Watcher lasts for so long and its damages, you're able to get your grenade back so quickly, it means that we can actually fuel our melee back and then through impact induction get our melee off more and more to actually get our grenade back. And then just to be sure that we're actually getting our grenade back, we have grenade kickstart. So while we have armor charges and we throw a grenade, it consumes all armor charges to grant us grenade energy back. But even if we don't have an armor charge, it'll grant us a little bit of grenade energy. Down to the chest piece, of course, we're taking double elemental resist to match whatever the current threat modifier is. So if it is a void threat on the activity you're going into, then you want a double void resistance, and then a third elemental resistance to match whatever damage you're feeling you're dealing the most with. Again, there's many times where there's harbingers and you're dealing with stasis damage, so you want to put on a stasis resistance, or you're dealing with strand damage, you want to put on a strand resistance. It's really up to you on what this third elemental one is, but always be sure that if you're dealing with like a void threat or an arc threat, you have double resist to match that threat. Down to the boots, we're taking double stasis weapon surge, so while we have an armor charge, we're getting an increase to our stasis weapon damage. This is huge because it allows our Aegir's Scepter to actually shred through majors and actually deal some good damage on yellow bars, and then it makes it so our chain of command deals wonderful damage, or any of the other stasis heavies that we're using. Having this double weapon surge is really nice to have, and it's not like it's vital, but whenever it's up, you can really see that damage increase. And then of course we're always taking recuperation, so whenever we pick up an orb of power, we're getting a burst of health. This can save you in a lot of cases, so be sure that you have recuperation, and when you see an orb of power and you're low on health, just go for it to get that burst. And finally, for the class item, we're taking Bomber, so whenever we use our Rift or our class ability, we're getting a little bit of grenade energy back, just to fuel into our ability loop. And then we're taking double Font of Restoration, so we have a plus 50 into recovery while we have an armor charge. This is why we didn't want to go above 50 recovery, because any more would have been wasted stats, because we're rocking this double Font of Restoration. Having this means our recovery goes up to 100, which increases our health regen, it shortens the delay of our health actually coming back to us, and then of course it makes our class ability on a reduced cooldown, which again, all across the board is what we're looking for. And that is going to do it for the build. Now, Prismatic has just been absolutely wonderful, completely succeeded on everything that it's supposed to be, and man does this build absolutely take Prismatic to its heights. The amount of actual Bleak Watchers and stasis damage you just have going on the field at one time is nuts. Aegir's Scepter just puts in so much work, and then if you get your hands on Chain of Command, by golly, can you just see the actual damage and carnage you cause. Because when you have 3 Bleak Watchers out and you activate Transcendence to throw out more Void and Stasis grenades and melees, you are just bringing the heat to any battlefield you step into. Now, of course, if you want a picture of the build, there's going to be one on screen, along with a dim link in the description below for easy copying. Well, if you like this video, be sure to hit that like button, hit a subscribe if you want to see future videos, and a comment if there's anything you want to say as I try and respond to all that I see. Well, thank you everybody so much for watching. I have been FreakyDude99. These builds have just been absolutely amazing. I want to share them with you as much as possible because, again, I just have so many builds cooking up here that I'm sure you want to try out, because every single one, man, it's just so much fun to play. Prismatic has just been an absolute home run, and I can't wait to see what new heights we eventually get to. So, thank you everybody so much for watching. I've been FreakyDude99, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace out.